Today we're going to talk about writing unlikable characters. So how do you feel about unlikable characters? Is it a real big turnoff when you open up a book as a reader and you feel that you don't like the character? Well, today we're going to talk about why you might actually want to write unlikable characters and why readers actually sometimes do really like them even though they don't like them. All right, so let's get started.
You have a story to tell, but you don't know where to start. Let me show you how to free your story. I teach you how to write and how to dig deep in your soul to release your story and make a difference in the world.
Welcome to the Julia Monte channel. If we're just meeting, I am Julia Monte. I'm a women's fiction author and here on Fridays to give you some writing tips. So let's talk about these characters that sometimes we don't like. And I'm not talking about the villains. So the villains are obvious, right? We don't like the villains and we're not supposed to like them. And actually the worst, the worse that they are, actually the more we like them because they're villains. They're supposed to be terrible. It's supposed to be giving the main protagonist problems. But what happens when one of your main characters is kind of unlikable? Then what happens? Is that something that the reader is not going to want? Actually, I've read all kinds of books where characters have issues, right? They might be thieves, they might be dishonest, they might be chauvinists, they might have all kinds of defects that we don't like, but we find that we're still rooting for them anyways. And so I want to talk about why that is and why sometimes even these characters that we tend to not like because they have characteristics that we don't like, we actually end up liking and we end up wanting them to probably to reform, but at least we want them to achieve a goal that would be good for them. Okay, so let's talk about what I mean by unlikable. So no character can be perfect, and we really don't want them to be anyways because they would be kind of boring. They all have some kind of defect. They all have something that makes them normal, right? That makes them human, and that's what we want. But then some characters just go a little overboard. They go over that, so that's what we tend to say. Well, I'm not really liking this character right now because he's not, he is being dishonest. He's cheating his grandma. He's doing something bad, right? And so that goes beyond just having a little defect. But what we want to do is we want to have even those characters that do have, some character flaws, to have some kind of redeeming quality. So recently, over the holidays, I read two books. One of them was about a character who was cheating on her husband with a married man. So he was cheating on his wife, she was cheating on her husband. And it's like, okay, well, what else is happening here, right? So I kept reading. And really, this character had no redeeming qualities. Like, her only goal was to sleep with this guy, and it wasn't going anywhere. It was just and then she was kind of disappointed when he really wasn't going to leave his wife. When at first she didn't really care if he did or not, but then of course she starts to. But there was nothing there. Like, there was nothing to cheer for this woman. There was some good writing. There was some just different little formatting that she did with the book that I thought was interesting. But I really didn't care about the character. I didn't find anything positive about the character that I liked. She was just plain unlikable. I really didn't care if she ended up with this guy. I just didn't care. Okay, so that's one thing you don't want, is you don't want the reader to just not care. So then I read another book. Okay, so finished that one, was kind of disappointed, didn't really like it. Then picked up another book, and this one was more of a typical romance. And the main character, the male main character, was really, really chauvinistic. Just the way that he treated the heroine, and there was just some things I didn't like about him because of that, right? But then he had some good qualities. He was actually it wasn't what he appeared. So even though he appeared to be really chauvinistic, he really wasn't that way. He was, but not to that extent that it seemed at first. He also was very generous with people that worked for him. He was kind. He was also, he had a lot of good qualities. He was generous. He was kind. He was kind of funny. Okay, so actually both characters were kind of funny, the heroine and the hero. So there were some good qualities. There were things about him that, even though there were some things that were kind of a turnoff, you still cheered for him because you really liked him. You thought he was, you think he's funny. You think he's a nice guy. So you can kind of forgive or hope that he changes during the course of the novel. Okay, so what do you need to do then to create a character that does have flaws, that does have character issues, and that is also, kind of unlikable, but also likable, right? So how do you do that? One of the things is you need to make sure that you are choosing your flaws carefully. So there are some things that we're willing to forgive, or that we're willing to look over and not, and we might not like it. It's not a huge deal, but there are some things, of course, that we would not accept in a character. A villain, yes, not a main character. Okay, so if your main character abuses children or abuses animals or is a racist, or there are some things that we're just really not going to like, and we're not, and we are going to get to the point like, I really don't care if this character gets what he wants because he's a horrible person. I don't want him to get what he wants, or in fact I want him to fail, right? They might start cheering in the opposite direction, and maybe that's what you want. I don't know, but there are some flaws that you need to really be careful. You can't just choose anything because again, we're kind of there are some things that just aren't heroic, and so that we're not going to accept that in our hero. And so what you should shoot for more is to have a little bit of a balance, right? So if your hero is a chauvinist, very, very arrogant and very boastful, then he should have the balance of some good qualities on the other side, right? Something positive. He's generous, he's kind, he's giving, he loves children, right? So something else to balance out some of the bad stuff that you've given that character. Okay, and then sometimes what makes characters unlikable is not so much a character flaw, but an action that character takes. So sometimes characters are human, and they're not going to do everything perfect, right? So sometimes they're going to do things that we just don't like what they did. An example of this that I saw recently on a TV show. So it was called, I believe it was Afterlife. Ricky Jarvis is the main character, and he is he's very depressed. He's very sad because his wife died, and throughout these different episodes, which there weren't that many, I don't know, there were 6, 8 episodes, something like that, to the whole show. And during the whole show, his wife is leaving little recordings for him, and you see him as really not a nice guy. So he's very rude to people. He really just doesn't care anymore about life because he's lost the love of his life. So there's a reason for him to be that way. But sometimes he's very unlikable. Just the things that he says to people, he makes people fun of people's weight. He just says whatever is on his mind without any filter whatsoever. So kind of like Michael from The Office, but worse because he's doing it sort of on purpose, where Michael's kind of clueless, right? This guy, I think his name was Tony, the character's name was Tony, just does this because he's hurt and angry, and so he's taking it out on other people. But there's this one scene where there's a drug addict, and the guy brings him heroin, and they're doing it together, and then the guy tells him that he really wants to kill himself, but he wishes he could buy enough drugs so that he could kill himself. And Tony says, well, if that's the case, I'll give you the money. Gives him the money so that the guy can buy the heroin and kill himself. He knows that this guy is going to do that. At least he told him he's going to do that. Gives him the money, the guy does that, the next day he's dead. And I was surprised that the series just actually glosses over this and just goes on, because to me that was sort of an unforgivable action. He was responsible for this guy's murder. He gave him, or suicide, he gave the guy the money to actually do this. So I don't know, and the series doesn't really address this. It just moves on, and eventually the character starts to change. and grow, and he does become more endearing, by the end of the series, and they go on with this. But I thought that was very interesting. So there are some things I think that are unforgivable, and I don't know that the character can, can overcome that sort of action. So I think you do need to be careful. It worked for this series. And I guess, I don't know what kind of backlash I got, if any, but I think as writers, we need to be careful with those kind of things. So your character can't just do anything, can't any kind of action, especially if it's something that's illegal or just really horrific. So the other way that you can make your unlikable character more likable is actually to make your character a little bit more intriguing. So I like the Jack Nicholson characters that he plays in his older age. A lot of the movies that he made, he had sort of the same weird, quirky character. So three of the movies that I thought of for this were, one was As Good as It Gets, where he's this kind of very, very quirky character that suffers from OCD, and he's really, really mean and unlikable at the beginning of this movie, but he slowly changes, right? So there's a woman that he loves, if you haven't seen this, and he slowly starts to change because he's trying to please her. He's homophobic and mean to dogs, but he changes and helps his his gay neighbor, and takes care of his dog, and does all these things that at the beginning of the movie he wouldn't have done, and so he slowly starts to change. Another one was The Bucket List, where he's terminally ill. At the beginning of the movie, he's just sort of this harsh businessman. He owns hospitals, I believe it was, and he doesn't really care about patients, but making money, put two patients to a room, whatever, until he gets terminally ill, and then he realizes that that's really not ideal, right, for somebody who is dying and needs some space, needs to be alone, and so he befriends his bedmate, and they go on adventures to fulfill their bucket list. And what he's really doing is really helping another person who probably couldn't have afforded to do some of the things that he wanted to do in his life to actually be able to do them. So he becomes, again, a nicer, better person, and he's interesting, right? He's an interesting person. Another one was Something's Gotta Give, where he sort of plays this older playboy who dates very young women, and he falls in love eventually with one of the woman's moms. And so he someone his own age. And I think the reason that this character was a little bit becomes more likable is because the movie really focuses on things that we all feel as we're getting older, right? We're just kind of afraid of getting older. We don't want to admit that we're getting older. And when he finally does accept this, he accepts the mom instead of the daughter, who he actually has more in common with intellectually and all that. Then you kind of see that he's accepted his stage, the stage of life that he's in, and he becomes more of a likable character. So if you're going to have an unlikable character, give them something interesting, something unique, something that people can find endearing and like about them. So along with all the bad stuff, again, you want that balance of some good things that the reader or the audience will like and say, okay, I can see why this person is this way, and hopefully they'll change, hopefully they'll get what they want, and they'll become a better person. Okay, so why bother writing unlikable characters? If it's hard enough to write characters that people like, why try to write a character that people might not like? Why risk that, right? Well, I think there's a good reason. First of all, people like to cheer for the underdog. They like to cheer for the character that maybe isn't the best character at the beginning. And I think also if you give these characters qualities that the average person has, as we all have character faults, we all have we're not perfect. And if they see this in a character and in your book, and it just helps people to relate better, right? And then they can see how this character is able to evolve and able to succeed even with these character flaws, even with these personality defects. So it just gives the average person a normal person to cheer for, rather than this very perfect character that maybe is not realistic. It's also more interesting for us as writers to write characters that are not perfect, right? So it's more of a challenge. It gives us more practice with creating difficult characters, creating personalities that are different and unique. And I think as a writer, I like that. I like writing characters that are not, perfect, or the same type of character over and over again. It just makes it more interesting, and it's more of a challenge as a writer. It's also, to be honest, less boring, right? Because sometimes perfect characters can be a little boring. So I think both readers and writers like reading about characters that are less than perfect. Also, the thing that we want to remember is that we don't have to love the character. Like, it doesn't have to be like we just love everything about them. We do have to care about the character, and the reader has to care about the character and has to care that the character reaches their goal, or reaches a goal. It isn't maybe not the goal that the character immediately wanted, especially if it's a character that wasn't a great character at the beginning, right? So if the character wanted something that wasn't good, maybe watching the character not get that goal, but get something that makes them a better person, or makes them realize something, and maybe improve on their imperfection, is actually the goal that we want them to have. And we care. So we don't have to like everything about them, but we do have to care about them, and we do have to be able to cheer them on and watch them and want to watch them reach their goals. Okay, so I hope this helps you. I hope that makes you kind of think about these type of characters that aren't your normal characters, especially if you're writing something like romance, where you do have the two perfect characters. Still give them a little bit, give them some flaws. You don't want them to be, they should be perfect for each other, but they don't have to be perfect people. All right, I hope this helps. If it does, please hit the like and share button, and also hit the subscribe button so that you will be notified next week when I post another video. And until then, have a great week, and I'll see you then. Bye.